introductory comments before we convene our joint meeting and proceed on with our business for today. My name is Bob Crum. I'm the Executive Director of the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin Page, who's the Executive Director of the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission. On behalf of our two boards, we want to welcome everybody to our regional building today. What we think is going to be a very exciting conversation, a very important conversation about our primary transportation need in the Hampton Roads region, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project. Before our chairs call together or call to order our joint meetings, they've asked me to just very briefly run through for everyone what our flow of business will look like for today, so you can understand how this is all going to begin to fit together. Shortly after my comments, Chair Hrtpo from the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission will call to order the regular board meeting of the Hrtac board. From there, he will then welcome the TPO members, and Chair Shepard, the chair of the HRTPO, will call to order the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization board meeting. From there, we'll ask for approval of the agenda as submitted. We are going to have one very important but minor tweak to that agenda. We're very fortunate today. We are going to be joined by the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Shannon Valentine, is going to be in attendance. I'm very pleased to announce that we have one Deputy Secretary with us. Deputy Secretary Rajan is here. He'll be joined by Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue. And I believe the Secretary is on schedule to arrive in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Chair Hrtpo, Chair Shepard, what I would ask is that we just have a little bit of flexibility that when the Secretary does arrive, I know she has some prepared comments she'd like to make to the two boards tonight. From there, then, we will have our public comment period. People have submitted their names for public comment. We'll be doing that for both boards. And then we will proceed to the main item for discussion today on the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. And Secretary Valentine, welcome to Hampton Roads. Appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm crisscross Virginia, and I cannot tell you how happy I am.
And I think everybody may know that Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue is here today as well. Thank you, Secretary. From there, then, we'll go through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel discussion items. We have 4 items that you're going to be briefed on today. One, a critical decision-making path for this project that we'll go over for you to let you know what the decision points look like over the next 5 to 6 months for this project. From there, you're going to hear from VDOT in terms of how the hot lanes operate and work through our 2 water crossings, both the HRBT and the high-rise bridge. Then we're going to hear from Hrtac. They're going to receive a report from 2 of their committees. They're going to discuss a proposal for a funding plan for the HRBT project. And then finally, we're going to hear a little more about a broader express lanes network that really is going to be a decision point not for today, but as we look to the May and June timeframe. From there, then, the TPO board will stand at ease because Hrtac will have some actions that they'll be taking. They'll consider their actions at that point in time. After those actions, that information will be turned over to our Transportation Planning Organization board, and Chair Shepard will walk us through, as a TPO board, the actions that we need to take today to keep this project moving and keep this project on track. And that will conclude our meetings for today. A couple main goals for today. Number 1, information sharing, so you have as much information as needed to make good, informed decisions. Number 2, Hrtac's decision on the funding plan for the HRBT project. And thirdly, the Transportation Planning Organization's action to take that funding plan and incorporate it into a TIP, Transportation Improvement Program amendment, so that we can advance this project forward. So with that, as in terms of a general overview, I'll turn the floor over to Chair Hrtpo and ask Chair Hrtpo to begin today's proceedings.
Thank you, Bob. And I'll ask when we go to the point that we're doing a vote for first and a second, if whoever does first and second, if they'll state their name and their locality so that Jennifer can get that recorded. So we don't have to try to figure it out later in the recordings. Thank you very much for that. And I'll go ahead and open this meeting of the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission and the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, our current board members, for December 13th, 2018. I'd like to welcome Chairman Shepherd, welcome you and your group, and thank you for allowing, coming to this meeting and joining that with us, and thanks to your organization, what you do for Hampton Roads.
Great, thank you. As chairman of the TPO, I'm going to call the TPO to order, and I do want to remind the TPO members, most of which are HR TAC members too, but just to remind you that this really is an HR TAC meeting. The TPO is here in a joint session to get the same information, but we have a funding, but we have the tip actions that are very important that we need to take at this time. So again, this is principally an HR TAC meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Shepherd. All right, we'll move on to number 4, public comment. Do you have any public comment cards?
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, just you may want to approve the agenda because we did have some blue sheet items.
I did see that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll ask for approval of agenda.
Second.
Who's first and second? Mary, is that right? Okay. You get that, Joe? Thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Now we'll go ahead and move into the
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 speakers that have signed up to speak and give comments to the commission today. Mark Gerdling-Yaltrowski is first, followed by John Gerdling.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honorable commissioners, and fellow interested parties. Lest we forget, it's easy when you're up to your hips in alligators it's hard to remember that the original objective was draining the wetland. The reason, one principal reason that HR TAC exists today is the conundrum of the Elizabeth River Crossings contract and its fulfillment. And I remind everybody, some of you may not use the crossings of the Elizabeth River on a regular basis. You're coming up on adjustment time again, which means that the toll rates will increase. Now, although there has been widespread recognition, in fact, bipartisan recognition, of what a failure the Elizabeth River Crossings agreement has been, and that, as I said before, was a stimulus for the creation of HR TAC, nobody has done anything to address those issues. There have been some temporary buy-downs. There is an agreement that mitigates the toll rates for certain people who are economically disadvantaged. But in terms of an overall mitigation of the impact of this awful agreement, nothing has been done. I want to suggest, especially to the General Assembly members present, that there is a specific exclusion of the Elizabeth River Crossings from the provisions of the HR Transportation Fund. And I believe that exclusion should be lifted so that some of the money that's being collected from residents of this region who are being tolled for use of those tunnels, the money that's being collected from those people should be accessible to help buy down the tolls. I only consider buy down a mitigation, not an ultimate solution. There needs to be more work done on correcting the contract deficiencies. But certainly a buy down would provide some temporary relief for those who have to deal with it day in, day out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. John?
Hello, I'm John Berger with the Newport News. I I just want to compliment Delegate Jones and Senator Wagner. Senator Wagner's not here, but this letter you sent to VDOT is fantastic. And to this whole group, in case everyone hasn't read it, I'm going to read the penultimate paragraph, which is probably the best thing that ever came out of General Assembly. Just as VDOT cannot compel Hrtac to take on the cost of the trestle work, Hrtac cannot compel VDOT to have the work performed now. However, if VDOT defers that work until after the new capacity is open and there is a meltdown, in quotes, when the existing lanes are shut down, the responsibility for that result will stem from VDOT's flawed decision, not Hrtac. I think that says an awful lot about what this meeting should be about. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. And Secretary Valentine, you would like to say a few words, and I know you've got such a busy schedule, flying back and forth, so we'd love to have you at this time give us a few words.
Thank you, John. I don't know your last name, but thank you very much because you did kind of set up an introduction. Thank you. Better? Well, Chairman Hrtpo, Chairman Hrtpo, thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I actually do not need to rush out immediately, and I apologize to everyone for the morning that I had, but again, I'm really happy to be here. I thought it was important that I be here in person today because of the fact that you all will be voting on the Transportation Improvement Plan, on the largest design build in Virginia's history, and certainly one of the largest design builds in the United States. There is no more important transportation project. It's going to be transformative, and we, the Commonwealth of Virginia, certainly recognize and respect just how important the work that you all are doing is. I will say to you that I will admit that I wish the resolution you had today had the Southern Trestles in it. I wish we had reached a resolution by today to make that a reality. But I will say that our teams meeting with the contractors yesterday have decided with their consent to move forward with an A and B procurement. It allows us to move forward getting a full scope of the project. An A and B procurement being that the trestles are B, and if there can be a funding resolution, the trestles, the southern trestles could be severed and removed from the contract. So we can still move forward with the full plan. We can still work to get the best cost possible for the estimates. And it does give us a little more time to work together to try to identify a way to resolve the funding issue. And the truth is, we do not want to give up. We met with Chairman Jones yesterday, and Tom Eglina was in the room, Eric Blue, Kevin Page, and our own Dick Donahue, our Deputy Secretary. We met yesterday. I think we have continued to commit to the fact that we do want to find a resolution. I believe the comment that was made, Chairman Jones, was creative. We're trying to be very creative, but the truth is the options are limited. The funding that we currently have cannot be used to secure debt legally and would require General Assembly action, legislative action, bond authorization. And the truth is, and I think your analysis showed that we were trying to find a way where we could reimburse Hrtac and pay for the initial debt service. And that was deliberately in there because as we have been working with our team and with some of the smartest people we have in the General Assembly from appropriations and finance, you know, that is limited to what we're able to do right now. Since the December 5th letter, I will say that we have continued to try to identify ways that perhaps if we could sweep some unspent balances or try to get money to you earlier, perhaps we can make a dent into what could actually be appropriated. But the important part is that we definitely want to take this time that this A&B procurement gives us to continue working to do it, because there's a real cost to to not including the 7 trestles at this time and how it operates, how the system would operate, the financial outlook, and the quality of life for the people who live. So we are going to continue working together and I feel confident that we're going to come up with something that's legal. As far as a funding resolution, we want to develop a tolling policy that serves the people in this region, that is compliant with the code and makes economic sense. We want to develop a road system that maximizes throughput. We know how important it is, and I wish some of you could have heard Delegate Jones yesterday actually talk about what it means to serve the people who live here. We want to stand with you as you do that. And regardless of what the final decisions are made about what the final procurement actually is, we want you to know that we will do everything possible to try to find a way to fund those 7 trestles. You will not make a final decision without knowing that we have done everything we can. And regardless of what the final decision is, we want to be a very good partner with you, a great partner to deliver a superior project. There's just really nothing more important. So my team is going to be very busy over the holidays, continuing to work on this. And I just thank you for the opportunity to say we are ready to continue. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for those kind words and your team and all the efforts that they've done. And as far as trying to move this forward, we appreciate that very much. And there's still work to be done, but it's good that we're moving a project in our region so far along. And it's, the taxation on the citizens that have brought us this far in order to afford this project and get it to this point. I know that, a little more than 2 years ago, this group was sitting in here and deciding what to do. And I want to say to this group, I'm very proud of each and every one of you and all the efforts you have made to come together and show Hampton Roads as one voice. It is amazing to take 17 localities. This is definitely government working at its finest. All the members of Congress and all the work they've done, the work y'all helped us with, the work each and every one of you members have done representing your citizens is phenomenal. And I cannot say any more of how proud I am to be the chair of this organization, but how much effort each and every one of you have worked so hard to bring this project forward. I've talked to some of y'all at 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in afternoons, in the mornings, and everyone has really held together in order to know that this is not only the largest project in the state of Virginia, but more than likely the largest single transportation project in the United States, right here in Hampton Roads. What more can Virginia be proud of than this project that we have in front of us? So I want to thank each and every one of you for all your efforts and all your hard work. It is not gone unnoticed. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Chairman, if we
Yes,
may add one more, just small thing, in that even without General Assembly action, we still would need, and I just want to be really clear, that we would still need the Commonwealth Transportation Board to sign off on whatever plan we have. And two board members, Mr. Miller and Mr. Malvern, are here today.
Yes.
Certainly they can vouch for the commitment that we have. And it will be challenging, even getting it through the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but I believe it's so important that I am willing to make that case.
Thank you. All right, it's just, still under the comments, it's amazing. Each member that was here several years ago, it's amazing that Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel wasn't even on the line items that we were looking at, and how we had come together. And I remember that meeting. It was a lot going on, and mayors and chairs and all y'all know what's going on, everyone else, is what we were trying to pull together. And in a little over 2 years, look where we are now. That is incredible. And so, it's amazing when you're working hard for the citizens, what you can accomplish. And y'all have done it. Y'all have done it. So hats off to each and every one. Thank you. All right, we'll move into item number 5.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Before you have two consent items, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the minutes of the November 15th meeting, as well as an amendment to approve the Hrtac 2019 Hrtac administrative budget that comes forward with the recommendation from the Finance Committee for approval.
Okay. We have a motion for approval, if you'll state your name and your jurisdiction.
Hrtac Hampton, move motion for
Second.
approval.
Your second?
Heather Johnson, second.
All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Item number 6.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving forward with the discussion items, as we mentioned earlier in the introductory comments to the commission's meetings, the TPO meetings, this is a concurrent presentation with the HRTPO. Under 6A, Executive Director Crum will take the lead on this for us, and then I will pick up on 6C. Bob, I'll turn the floor over to you to run through the critical path items that we have going forward.
Thank you, Kevin. In our previous TPO meeting, and I believe at our Hrtac meetings, we heard some very good comments indicating that it would be helpful to clarify the process and what the critical decision path looked like on the HRBT project as we move forward over the next 5 to 6 months. I want to thank DDOT staff, particularly Chris Hall, our district administrator, and members of this board who all provided us some input. Each of you have at your place a one-page card entitled Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel Critical Decision-Making Path that we wanted to provide to you to try to clarify some of these important milestones. December 13, you've heard the agenda for today, so I'm not going to repeat that information. The big item from today that I think we all recognize is the importance of the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP amendment, to move forward today. And you're going to hear some recommendations from Hrtac in terms of the plan of finance, and then the HRTPO will be considering that information as they consider approval of that TIP amendment today. Smart scale funding becomes our next deadline. As I believe you're all aware, we have a $200 million smart scale application submitted by the TPO. Commissioner Rich, I want to thank you for your correspondence that we received earlier this week indicating that things are looking promising. There's no promises yet, but we really believe that project's going to score very favorably. First announcements, first scores will be released on Smart Scale in January, and then it goes through a public participation process and deliberations at the CTB where final approval would happen in June. So the next 6 months will be critical for that process. We are optimistic in terms of the competitiveness of our application. Next important milestone is January 15, and that's where technical proposals will be due to VDOT. And then as you can see, things start happening quite quickly. February 8th, price proposals due to VDOT and Commonwealth Transportation Board on February 19th. We'll receive a briefing. The Hrtac board members in the room, your March meeting will be a very important meeting. Director Page will be working with you on March 21 to line up the various project agreements that will need to be executed by Hrtac at that point in time. And then March 31, 10 days later, VDOT's goal is to issue their notice to proceed. So you begin to see that things are going to start moving quite quickly over the next 3 months on this project. And that does give time, as the Secretary mentioned, for these continued deliberations and problem solving as we go forward to take care of some of the additional items on this project. Build grant application, we do have an update. I'm sorry to say it is not good news. We submitted a $25 million grant application to the federal government for the BUILD program. Those projects that were funded were released earlier this week. We were not selected for funding. You'll recall this is the second time now that we've asked for federal dollars. The Commonwealth, we really appreciate their efforts. Deputy Secretary Donahue and I worked very hard. The Commonwealth actually submitted under the infra program about a year and a half ago a $200 million ask for the HRBT project, which also is not funded. So did want to give you that update. We were not successful in the $25 million build application. And then an item not to that doesn't require action today, but will be coming later in June is, today we're going to be talking about hot lanes only at the water crossings, only at HRBT, and only at High Rise Bridge. But later, this Commonwealth's working on an analysis for a broader hot lane network. That data and information will not be available until later this spring, but that's a coming item, and we wanted to show you what that time frame is, that the Commonwealth will be with us to give us a briefing on that analysis. Chairman Hrtpo, Chairman Shepherd, that concludes my overview of this decision-making path. We just wanted everybody to have that so they knew what the critical milestones were going forward. No action needed on this, but obviously with having Pete on here, if there's any questions about those milestones, those would be appropriate at this time.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Crum.
Okay, from there then, we're going to invite Chris Hall, our Deputy Administrator, to walk us through the next slide.
Welcome, Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Madam Secretary, members of the board, thank you this afternoon for being able to share some of this updated information with you. Again, I'm Chris Hall, the new district engineer here in Hampton Roads, and it's my pleasure to be here to deliver some of this information. I would just like to make sure and remind everybody that, yes, we have a big project we're deciding on. We've got over $1 billion under construction in the region today, right now. So again, that's, because of the cooperation here and the work by everybody in this room to make that happen as well. So an excellent story all around. What I'd like to do is provide to you, I've got a few slides here to provide an update, if you will, some preliminary information on the current performance of our reversible hot lanes express network on 64, as well as Bob mentioned, some of the information and data that came out of the operational analysis that was part of the project approval process for both the High Rise Bridge project, which is now in construction, and the Hampton Roads Bridge tunnel. First, I would like to start to talk about where we are in terms of performance of our reversible hot lanes you all are familiar with. On the 64 reach there that goes from 564 south through the 264 interchange. I would like to just remind everybody that this is preliminary information, and we're going to be working steadily as a parallel effort in conjunction with the regional study that I'll be talking a little bit about later on to flesh out more of the details on specifics on how this particular portion of the network has performed thus far. As you're aware, this portion of the network has been open since January of this year. Some of the tolling information up there, on average, between 83 cents and 71 cents per toll on those peak period hours. And then, of course, our gross revenue right on track with being that which was estimated for the project when we open it up. So right now, those numbers are as of November, about 1.7 million, and we're on track to be at or around 1.9 million as we close out the year for gross revenues for that hot lane system. I think one of the good news stories here is when you look at operational efficiency, it is performing as we would hope, and that is to provide more efficiency to the general purpose lanes in addition to providing some revenue for the region. And that is borne out by that percentage up there that over 25, on average, about 25% of the total volume that goes through that area in the reversible period, so it is, it's only one direction that's measured each time. It's about 25% is on that hot system as opposed to across as a percentage of the total volume that's moving through that system. So that is the direction that we want to see. Again, I would just say that we've got a lot more data to collect in the specifics of speeds and volumes that I think will bear out in a greater degree that the decision to move that way was the right decision, and that we're actually getting more efficiency out of our general purpose system in that area. Next, I'd just like to move to our currently the largest design build project in the state, soon to be eclipsed by what we're talking about this morning. But nevertheless, the high-rise bridge, which you all know is under construction right now. We're actually out there piling our 30-inch diameter piles, right now the square piles, and we're just received our full permitting action for that as well. So that's another good news story on this project. That was a large hurdle, so we'll be working in the river soon. This project that you're should be somewhat familiar with, as you look at the entry of the hot lanes in the beginning of the project here, just to the east of the 264, yes, correction, 264 interchange, excuse me. This is where the hot network will begin. The entry points are going to be in this general area. About 3.5 miles east of 264 to be specific. And it will follow this profile all the way down to profile 1, all the way down to where the system intersects Route 17. And that's this profile down here on the bottom right-hand side of this, or left-hand side of this slide as you look at it. And that profile contains the 2 hot lanes on the inside of the profile and the 2 general purpose lanes on the outside of the profile. And so we'll have 3 lanes each direction, with one of those being a hot lane as part of the system. We'll proceed on from where the Route 17 crosses on over the actual crossing, the high-rise bridge, to just to the east side of the high-rise bridge here, where will exit the system. That profile is profile 2 is on that part. And the difference here is you still have the hot lanes on the inside, but what we've added here is what we call the managed shoulder, similar to what you see on 264 there in the Virginia Beach area, which will be actually to add capacity during peak hours as needed. And basically what we'll do, we manage that similar to the way we do in Virginia Beach area, is where if the traffic speeds drop below 35 miles an hour, we'll open those lanes up to provide additional capacity in our general purpose lanes. One of the key issues here is working the geometry here and such that we have the necessary space and time in order for that traffic to re-maneuver such that they can into the 464 interchange there. This profile will continue all the way to just to the east of the 464 interchange. What we see in the initial analysis that was done as part of the NEPA process, and again, that analysis was a build, no-build comparison between the preferred alternative and a no-build. What we see coming out of that, or what we saw coming out of that, is about a 30% usage of those hot lanes during peak periods, and that's tracking sort of like what we see on the reversible lanes. About the traffic volumes through that area today are about 80,000 cars during those peak periods. Looking at the initial data coming out of the general purpose lane savings, and again, this is a comparison of this comparison was done at the time of opening of what the volume would, what the delays would be, no build, what the delays would be with the preferred option. You see there's some of the time savings in the westbound and eastbound lanes in the general purpose lanes. One thing to note also that I think is very important is these projects, as designed, this one under construction, will operate as a separate hot facility. So what you see here as designed and as under construction will operate efficiently as a standalone hot facility. Next, I'd just like to move on to the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and this one, as you know, is still in procurement. This information is a little less specific and discrete based on the fact that it's all sort of conceptual on how Mr. Hrtac and his team is working through the proposal process. Nonetheless, as many of you are familiar with, we're not familiar with, I'll just walk through where we see the efficiencies coming in, the performance data that comes out. Again, similar to the high-rise bridge, this is a no-build preferred option comparison that was done during the NEPA process and the traffic analysis that came out of that. Some significant numbers up there in terms of general purpose lane increased time savings. One key note here is this is tied to our current long-range training plan, or long-range training, transportation plan timeline. It's 2040. And you see the numbers up there of what the general purpose time savings are, and then also the hot lane usage data. So again, we see about 100,000 on up to 120, 130,000 cars using this facility every day. We project significant increases in efficiency, obviously, with the construction of this newer facility. The other thing I'd like to cover here is just, again, to remind everybody how this system is sort of in concept, laid out to work. You will enter the system just to this would be to the north and or west up here of the Settlers Landing interchange, if you're familiar with that area, just as you come down off the Hampton River bridges. Very, very specific in the design as we're moving forward to make sure that the LaSalle interchanges are adequately serviced there. So obviously critical to the city of Hampton so that folks can use the LaSalle interchange to enter and to be able to exit from the hot lane and get back into the LaSalle interchanges on that side. The exit going coming out of the system traveling west will be just after the Mallory overpass there and before the Settlers Landing, but will not be geometrically placed so folks can use the Settlers Landing interchange. So that's in very general terms how the entrance and egress point on the north and west end of the project is laid out at this point in time. On the southern end, as you travel then through the project, moving from west to east, again, you were familiar with this. Mr. Hrtac's briefed this before. The idea is we'll have essentially 3 lanes of traffic and a part-time hot shoulder moving in each direction, utilizing the existing facilities for the westbound traffic and the new facility for the eastbound traffic. Again, this will be a hot facility with 1 hot lane and a part-time hot shoulder, similarly managed at this point. And again, that's being worked out on the same kind of mode that we would operate the other managed hot shoulder lanes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is it appropriate to ask a question now or wait to
Yes,
ask
sir.
the initial?
You can ask. Sure. Go ahead.
Well, I think in one of our previous discussions, we were talking about where the beginning of the hot lane eastbound would start on the Hampton side. We talked about allowing people the opportunity to start moving over, which is kind of the problem you have now when you have the bottleneck created for the tunnel, is that as you approach Settlers Landing Road, where it goes from 3 lanes down to 2, you've got people who are still trying to move over, plus you've got traffic that's coming off of Settlers Landing Woodland Road trying to get into 64. If in fact you make that the area where you have the beginning of the hot lane, you will probably, I won't say it will actually be a fact, but you will have people trying to get over or out of that middle lane to get out of the hot lanes. So I think perhaps you will create a bottleneck there, whereas you're trying to stop that, because it's only about maybe a mile or so before you actually get toward the tunnel, or maybe a mile and a half as you go into the bridge. So it seems to me that if you started farther back, either up by LaSalle, you allow people at least to start beginning to move over and figure where they're going to be. Otherwise, you're going to create a bottleneck right there at Settlers Landing that you already have.
Yes, sir, and that's still in the conceptual stage in that zone on how we're gonna lay that whole process out from, and I think you've had some conversations with the tunnel team on where the sorting begins, where the signage begins, that whole area from LaSalle all the way there to Settlers Landing.
Well, no conversation, just I live there. That's my primary route. That's my primary route for getting onto 64 and getting downtown Hampton. And some mornings, there is such a bottleneck that I just have to go back down Woodland Road and try and find another way of getting into downtown Hampton.
Yes, sir.
And traffic bottlenecks right there. And that's going to be another choke point if, in fact, you don't allow people to start having, making that decision of either getting into the lane, getting out of the lane sooner.
Mayor Tuck, to be able to answer your question with regard to the sort location associated with the project that we're talking about right now, we are looking to move the sort location closer to the Hampton River Bridge, either on the east side of the Hampton River Bridge or on the west side, to be able to start that sort location much earlier in the stage. Ideally, we would be closer to LaSalle, between LaSalle and Rip Rap, where that sort location exists. However, the funds are outside the project right now. We don't have sufficient funds to be able to start that sort location, provide the added capacity back to that, and reconstruct those 13 bridges along that section. So what we're doing to be able to normalize traffic and improve safety along that section that we're talking about is being able to move the sort location back to roughly, as we discussed, Jim Utterback and I discussed with you, about where that sort location actually happens. We'll start it with a painted double white line, transform that into a buffer system until we can get to the bifurcated roadway, which would be at Settlers Landing, or just to the east of the Settlers Landing overpass.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mayor brings up an excellent point. I was just going to encourage the EDOT, as part of your planning and consideration, that when coming on the 495 corridor coming out of Maryland into the Commonwealth, as you're probably well aware, you have the way the partition is set up so that you can move traffic from the 495 onto the 95 corridor south towards Richmond, and then of course you can push local traffic in one direction and then another traffic into 395. And I think that might be, for us, a model we may want to look at, and just to figure out, just to the mayor's point, you're going to have local traffic, you're going to have traffic pushing onto the south side, you're going to have traffic moving in different areas, plus the Coliseum area. So it might be something that we could look at as a benchmark to see how that success is up there in Northern Virginia, and then based on that, with the distance and the like, how that can translate into this area.
Mr. Chairman, Nancy, what I'd say is we are looking at those, and part of our sort locations is certainly associated with signing, a significant amount of advanced signing, pavement markings, and delineation that we will provide. Will be local traffic and not, but yes. We have modeled this, and what we're finding is that the further back the sort location is, the safety, the more normalized the traffic volumes and the speeds are, so that we can create a stable and a safer environment for those merge-to-merge locations as we approach the Settlers Landing interchange.
Thank you. And Mayor, I live right near there too, so I go through that every day. Yes, Mr. Chairman. The last thing I would like to mention here is, as we move down on the south, to the south and east end of the project, right now the entrance as you're moving westbound is about a half a mile west of Granby Street on ramp. So obviously the idea there is to allow for the appropriate amount of area and space for the sorting and maneuvering to happen, but also to facilitate the use of all the Granby ramps there on the east end of the project. As for the exit, that's about a half a mile west of the 564 interchange. Again, exact locations to be determined, but really looking at the sorting and maneuvering as you move into the 564 interchange, the hot lane system there, the reversible system, and then also to get into the 64 general purpose lanes. Unless there are any further questions.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things, it all boils down to money. When we talk these variations, I mean, obviously we don't want to create congestion. I mean, the whole effort here is to reduce congestion, right? So, are we going to see any cost comparisons for various placement and merging?
What I'd say right now is the project limits are set. We know that.
Is that set by terms of right-of-way?
Are set by location, fiscally constrained for one. The second part is, let's take the entranceway into the 64 on the Hampton side. We know that we cannot affect another bridge, the Hampton River Bridge. So we will be sorting at that location in that vicinity with paint and buffer post-mounted filling. We know where that sort location is. The current sort location is right now on top of the Settlers Landing area. We know that we need to push it back. Those limits are defined by just paint and buffer tubes, that say. The entranceway associated with Granby Street is not, we're determining that through the traffic modeling to allow for ingress and egress in the westbound direction, either be it on 64, coming off of the 64 reversible lanes, 564, and then allowing for the ingress from Granby Street. So those sort locations, while Mr. Hall has indicated that their final locations are yet to be determined, they're pretty well nailed down right now.
Okay, so I'm now a little concerned that we talked about the Settlers Landing as actually, is that a beginning or an end?
The Settlers Landing in the eastbound direction is the beginning.
Okay.
The Granby Street entrance in the westbound direction is at the beginning.
All right, I'm just thinking, I thought you were gonna come up on the other side because we show in the charts here going up to about the intersection of 664. And I thought there was some maneuvering room in there to have the sorting taking place well before you get to the bridge. Otherwise, you're going to be in a very small. I think for what we're trying to do is move more traffic to into that area from Settlers Landing, basically down to the what's that road goes to the Phoebus? That's Mallory. You'll be jamming up there because you've got other people trying to flow in.
And it may be very beneficial to come back to the next board TPO meeting to be able to show where that bifurcated roadway would start, in at least having some graphics associated with it. Our sort location starts at the Hampton River Bridge. We are already separating traffic into the hot lane, hot network, right at the Settlers Landing. And that's already in a buffered lane situation. So we've already pushed the traffic out into the general purpose lanes, and we start the bifurcation of the roadway right after the Settlers Landing interchange, and we're already in the hot configuration, the managed configuration, as Mr. Hall showed, before the Mallory Street interchange. So we're already separating traffic there.
Okay, so I would think that for our board, both boards, to have some understanding to see what this is going to look like. I mean, I got a vision, but I don't think my vision lines up maybe with Mayor Tucker or your vision. So it'd be nice to really see for the public what we're looking at, and that way, you know, there won't be any big surprises in the end.
Thank you. All right. Blue?
Thank you very much.
All right, next we'll look at the update of the Hrtac Plan of Financing I-64 HRBT New Capacity Expansion Project tip limit.
Thank you, Chair Hrtpo, and members of the commission and TPO.
It's really an honor to stand before you today to talk and celebrate about a project that's moving forward so quickly, and one that's been a real collaborative effort moving forward. I want to thank the Funding Agreement Advisory Committee that Chair Hrtpo created to advise him and the Finance Committee on how to advance with the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. And I really think that it's been great having the two host mayors of the project, Hampton and Norfolk, at the table. But also the value that's come to the table as well has been the designated spokespersons who obviously have the road to Richmond embedded in their brain and probably have some of the first automatic driving vehicles because they've gone to Richmond so frequently, and that's Delegate Jones. Thank you for your help on that, as well as Senator Wagner's as well. They've really been able to help us, and Secretary Valentine having those conversations that we need, if you all could bring forward with us. Moving forward with that, the intent of the presentation today is to report out to the commissioners and to the TPO the value of the work behind us is the body that brings forward to you is the validation of the $3.56 billion of funding that Hrtac has in its 6-year program. And in doing that, I want to give you a little background as to how we came to that conclusion and recommendation moving forward. The Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project, as you know, and everyone's been talking about, so it's no new news to everyone. Settlers Landing through the tunnel and then over and then back down to 564. 3 lanes by land on each direction, 4 lanes by what they call marine crossing moving forward to give you a 6 lanes by land, 8 lanes by sea. Paul Revere kind of atmospheric condition. We're not holding up lanterns yet, but we are holding up tunnels. So it's been a great movement moving forward. In our funding plan, I want to thank David Miller, PFM, and Leon Song. Where are you over here? Raise your hand, please. These 2 individuals are nationally renowned in what they do. I've heard about David through some members of my family who live in California, but openly tell me that David refuses to work in California. So, but he's worked in every other state of the mainland United States. Just talking about the capacity we have before us in our current funding plan, the $3.562 billion moving forward. Still has the caveats that we had in our assumptions. The amounts are also obviously conditioned on our revenue projections. We are looking at Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and high-rise bridge as toll events only, and that's with maximum throughput. Thank you, Secretary Valentine, for correctly stating that, because that's something that I think has been very good for this administration to carry over from the previous administration about how we're talking about a network development that maximizes the facilities that we are all making investments in and the throughput of those facilities for the benefit of our citizens and our visitors to the region. We also looked at the 6-year revenue projection as it currently stands today. The governor will be releasing in his proposed budget some new revenue projections, but the crystal ball that I have in my hand, which y'all pay me to try to look out for, I think is looking into the future. I think we're going to be okay on that coming out with the new projections. So our funding capacity is based on those assumptions moving forward in the revenue growth. In essence, I'm looking over here for PFM to give a nod here. The $3.562 billion is still available in current, Mr. Miller.
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's the good piece of this. And thank you, Administrator Hall, for also talking about the independent utility of the operational ability of the 2 independent facilities. If we did, in fact, just hold the water crossings, it looks to me like we have an operational facility with some minor tweaks on the, shall we say, Settlers Landing to the west weave that Mayor Tuck brought up, and I can certainly understand where you're going with that. I want to talk about terminology for a minute. You'll hear the terms all the way through the TPO part of this presentation, and Mike Kimball, I don't know where you are, but he's going to, there you are, Mike, I'm sorry, to my right. I'm flying right here, sorry about that, in my peripheral vision. Mike's going to get more in depth about that description, but terminologies have become very commonplace to refer to the trestles between Phoebus and the first crash island, or first tunnel island they call it, as being the north trestles, and then the south trestles are the trestles that run from the South Island over to Willoughby. You kind of wonder why the yellow is on these tunnel bridges and then not on those. The north trestles are part of the SEIS, preferred alternative, that was selected by the TPO, prioritized and handed to Hrtac. for the funding committees involved, both the advisory committee and the finance committee, to find a way to fund. The yellow trestles are handled as part of the expansion project for HRBT, and then the south trestles in question, which have been a moment and topic of discussion in the opening remarks today, are the ones that need to be replaced that Hrtac at this point is not funding through this program. To kind of give you an idea of the current cost projections of the HRBT project, I want to thank Project Director Hrtac for providing us this set of numbers. The preliminary work is at $30 million that Hrtac has provided to VDOT to date to develop the project. The base scope includes the new capacity construction, the trestles in yellow, plus the additional roadway. And then in the design build contract, you have the south trestles. The south trestles are the ones that, again, are the moment and part of discussion that's absent in our $3.562 billion TIP recommendation letter today. There's also a no excuse incentive for completing the project in advance. That's not a given number, it's one where they have to perform, the awarded design builder. And also there's an owner's cost of conducting the project and running the project, the oversight of VDOT moving forward with preliminary engineering, and also construction oversight as well. There's a contingency, as this commission knows, in the TPO of $335 million. That again is not a given number, it's one that goes through scope validation. That's another term you've probably heard before. And during that process, there's a float down and a release of those funds that do come back to Hrtac, which we've done. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for the most recent ones, which has allowed us to move some other projects forward thanks to that good working relationship. Now over $1 billion worth of projects that are under contract with Hrtac. One point I want to make, in your presentation that came out in your package, there's $4 million that's project budgeted that is included as a stipend to the unsuccessful offer. As you know, mega projects of this size are very expensive to develop a proposal for, and in the effort of trying to keep and attract as many proposers as possible, $4 million is awarded under the RFP as a stipend to the unsuccessful offerer for working through the venture of making an attempt to become the awarded and selected contractor. I want to thank Deputy Secretary Morteza, there you are. Thank you very much for your efforts to allow, and Secretary Valentine as well, for allowing Hrtac to move forward and, shall we say, use their base model in CDM Smith, which we had done business with before, to conduct an investment-grade traffic and revenue study update based on Finance Committee Chair Wagner's suggestions and requests through the process at our last meeting. We also added a third scenario, talking with Senator Wagner following that we moved forward on. Scenario one was tolling system, full tolling, all vehicles at one time. HOV2 and then HOV3 are free during peak hours. Now, you use HOV2 because it's a non-concession run facility, and HOV3 is what would be required under a concession scenario for those facilities. Scenario 4 was reduced tolling scope, where you toll all vehicles all the time. In that reduction, we also looked at HOV2 free during peak hours only, and then HOV2 and 3, as you can see up there, same ideology as what I stated previously. If you look at the coding here, everything in 1, 2, and 3 is I-64 from Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel all the way through to Bowers Hill, so that's the full network. And then we broke it out in just the water crossings, HRBT and High Rise Bridge, also acknowledging that you have the existing I-64 express lanes, which also operate in this reversing capacity during the day that we're all very familiar with. So for our revenue analysis moving forward, although we, as you can see in the maps here, scenarios 1, 2, and 3 is the entire network, scenarios 4 through 6 included just the tolling networks and the water crossings, and of course acknowledging that there's already the express lanes that are in play during the system that we're talking about if we just toll the water crossings. For the purposes of our funding plan, we only acknowledged High Rise Bridge and HRBT being tolled in that consideration or a toll financing plan. Just for the record, we have $345 million in the current 6-year program. It's a total of $365 million of tolling revenues That includes the cost of issuance and all of the other preparatory work and service work to get to that point. So the 365 is an item that we actually need in the funding plan. It's considered in the funding plan. Hrtac is carrying the funding plan now for several years. And in doing so, we move forward with the recommendations that you'll see in just a minute. The traffic and revenue study results, and I want to thank CDM Smith for providing these ahead numbers before the total projects report will be issued after probably the first of this calendar year. Is that if you run through the 6 scenarios, whether it be high-rise bridge or Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, you can see very quickly and easily that the numbers are rather flat. Side-by-side comparison, regardless of which way that Hrtac or the TPO go in the decision process, in the policies that could be made or given or handed off in this region, regardless of what you choose, it still validates our funding plan. Any selection that you make is very close to another selection that could have been made, because it shows that the greatest value is at the water crossings only, and the rest of the network tends to not bear as much fruit as that of those that would like to get across the water as quickly as possible. We also looked at, and thank you for one of our funding agreement advisory committee members for asking the question. The minimum toll rate required was 50 cents in 2018 dollars, with no maximum toll rate. Remember, this is a managed lane facility where you try to maintain an average speed. But some assumptions were made in 2018 dollars with Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel around 499 eastbound and 753 westbound, and high-rise bridge at a max at 120 as well. You can see those dates, rising up through 2030 as you look at that inflation factor. The uninflated revenues in 2018 dollars were provided in the study at 2.5% inflation rate, so you kind of know where that is for those of you who would want to know about that. And again, we were able to validate and move forward, as Mr. Miller indicated earlier. We still have a very valid funding plan we've been carrying for Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel that provides for the funding of $365 million total all in for tolling in the funding plan as those revenues move forward. The status of funding of the South Trestles, I don't want to really go in depth on this because I think we've discussed that rather intense already. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the clear message is the last bullet of this slide, which I'd like to draw your attention to, that we're all continuing to work together to identify a potential solution. And I do agree with everyone in the room here and staff to Hrtac that that's something I feel that all of those parties involved, including most importantly the two representatives that are representing Hrtac, thank you, Chair Hrtpo, for the Funding Agreement Advisory Committee, to move forward on this. So we'll find some pathway through this between now and in conclusion one way or another between now and the time we need to meet again in March. The next steps are the TIP amendment request. So as we're leading you to this conversation today, we've had Mr. Hall brief you on the operational capabilities of the independent water crossings. You've seen that our funding plan brings forward to you from Hrtac a funding plan that attributes its toll revenues to the water crossings only and not to the entire network, because a decision is not made on that network at this time. As Executive Director Crum mentioned earlier, you have a decision tree path before you. But what may be seen today as a parliamentary procedure for the TIP amendment is one that has had an enormous amount of regional collaboration and cooperation, an intense amount of involvement of the elected officials on these committees as they move forward. What you see here today before you is what we know and what we don't know. What we know is $3.562 billion is ready to advance a project that we were asked to participate in as Hrtac and develop a funding plan for as prioritized by the TPO. So the process and work today is one where we will have an agenda item, Mr. Chairman, moving forward in your part of the agenda of this concurrent meeting session, where we will be taking action on a TIP amendment as a commission, and from that TIP amendment, you will sign and hand over to Chair Shepherd to address more deliberately at the TPO, involving the issues of the policies of crossing the two water systems, the tolling of those two water systems, and then programming that TIP into the federal process. So I want to conclude with my closing remark is I'm ready to move forward, Mr. Chairman, with the remaining part of the agenda. through the presentation process, and we'll answer any questions at this time.
Sure. Yeah, Kevin, I know you talked about it briefly, and I'm sorry, as soon as you said the number, my brain locked up. You identified $3.65 billion, I think on one of your slides, as cost. And my understanding was that the Fifth Amendment was going to be 3.56. That's a $100 million difference.
We have the 3.562, and the total project, including the trestles. Remember, our TIP amendment request does not include the trestles. The $3.562 billion is a not-to-exceed action of the Hrtac Commission to provide funding for the new capacity that I showed highlighted in yellow on the slides earlier. The trestles of the 375 is net of the 3.562. Obviously, if you remove that, that's the budget that's there today. Remember that they're still in negotiations, they being VDOT, through this P3 process. And we are pushing out the 6-year program total number of $3.562 billion, not to exceed for the new capacity.
3.562.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just not catching it. So what's the 3.662?
The 3.662 is based on the request for proposals, value of not to exceed $3.1 billion for the design build contract, and then $90 million noise species incentive, $122 million for PE and construction oversight, and then the contingency that I talked about earlier.
So if we approve this for 3.56 billion, we're going to be able to proceed, and it's going to be within our funding capability.
Yes, sir, and thanks to Secretary Valentine for her announcement today, which was that the Commonwealth is moving forward with a design-build contract that has a base scope option. The base scope includes the proposals from the proposers as the new capacity plus the trestle bridges, the south trestle bridges. What I think Secretary Valentine commented this morning, earlier this evening, was that the 375 number has an option to be removed, which means there's an exercise clause that the trestles could be taken out of the design build contract proposals on a time limit. I don't know the exact days, you'll have to help me with that, I believe it's around 180. But it gives us an opportunity as a region, an opportunity as a Commonwealth, and also the legislative season before us to try to sort all this out, but still move forward with the procurement and the opportunity without cost of sacrifice until 100 days after award. So, Commissioner Bridge, if I've messed up on your dates, I apologize for that.
What I'd say, Kevin, is that from our conversations with both design-build teams yesterday, our intention is to continue to move forward, have an executed contract for the base contract by March 31st, April 1st of 2019, next year. And at that point in time, I have 180 days from the execution of that contract to fund the trestles and put those into the overall contract. So ideally, this does buy us a little bit of time to be able to identify that funding mechanism, but the sooner I have those trestles into the contract executed and moving, I can make sure that it's part of the permit, the design, and moving forward in a cohesive manner. So March 31st is the first target date for us to sign. The TIP amendment will help us get to that point. But from that point forward, we have 180 days before I would need to execute a contract for the south trestles.
Mr.
Yes.
Question. Steve, just remind me, am I incorrect in thinking that as a backup plan, worst case scenario, in order to be able to procure the financing that you would need for these south trestles, that VDOT could go and get Garvey bonds in order, since this is an anticipated need, they could go and could they not go and use this for a backup plan for financing these south trestles?
We cannot do that without legislative, without a legislative decision to do that. We would have to be authorized to do it. Right now, the budget language has that the Garvey bonds that we have are committed to smart scale. So we would have to have a legislative change in order to put them somewhere else. Which is why, I've consistently said that without legislative action or a bond authorization, we would not be able to do it today.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Page, is it to sort of clear up the confusion about the 3.6 versus the 3.562? If you took the 3.662 and took the trestles out, that leads you to about 3.2 something. And there's a couple $100 extra million in there, since it's all not said and done yet, of room, if you will. And that's why it's 3.562 as opposed to 3.29 or whatever that number would have been. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Shepherd, you summed it up very nicely.
That's Mr. Shepherd.
Sheffield.
Well, we're both Shepherd, just my middle. The second thing I'd like to say, I hope this is an appropriate time. I've been somewhat involved in this in the discussions at CTV level and otherwise between the state and the TAC and the General Assembly members, et cetera. And it has been high energy and good work on everybody's part, I think. And I'd like to say thanks to the Secretary and to HR TAC folks and to the General Assembly members who've been working all in good faith, although there's been disagreements along the way. I think everybody's worked very hard and in good faith to get us here. We're not done yet. As the Secretary's told us, we've still got some work to do, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we will find a way to get it done under the constraints that we have. So I just wanted to add my voice of thanks to the Secretary, her team, and HR TAC, and to the legislative group here.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
And actually, Delegate Yancey mentioned a term that I heard for the first time this past Monday, and I know there are quite a few folks here at this table who were not here on Monday, and in fact, probably at our last meeting, there was discussion still of how possibly VDOT could fund the replacement of the trestles. Is it appropriate to explain what this Garvey thing is all about, or are we just going to not touch that at all, or I see shaking your head, so we're going to leave it alone?
Mayor Tuck, I think this gets back to Secretary Valentine's point earlier, is that we're not going to leave any stone unturned, okay, on this. To start talking about Garvey's would probably take 25 minutes, and I'm not trying to rush the commission, but I will say that Garvey's are legislatively, through an act of the General Assembly, identified as a maximum not to exceed value that has certain conditions on it that in order to use those funds, they have to be provided by. Back to Secretary Valentine's comment that they would need legislative authority, so there needs to be a tweak in the code, not only to deal with the deliberate use of the Garveys, but also the fact that they only probably have a couple $100 million left in capacity that they're authorized under the current debt ceiling of the Commonwealth. So I think there are two mechanisms here that need to fall into place, and that's why I mentioned to you, I think there's some value here, although I do agree with Commissioner Britch's comment, the faster we get this into the overall contract, the more we get it moving, the best value, both on time and value of the contract for permitting. But it also gives us a time for the General Assembly to potentially react, because we've now been able to identify the challenge of the Garveys, if that's a potential mechanism. Thank you.
And I appreciate what you've done, what you just said. I just want to at least try and have, I guess, some understanding among all of us in terms of that perhaps being some other way of doing it. Like I said, I heard it for the first time on Monday. You mentioned it here today, and again, I don't know if everyone around the table has some understanding of what that is.
Does John Lawson want to, it's up to you, Madam Secretary.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to Delegate Yancey and Mayor Tuck that the concept of using Garvey bonds has certainly been something that we've been looking into. So anyway, just wanted you to know that that is on the table, but at this point would require action. I just wanted to.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Miller has given me some assurance that something will happen. Earlier, I was not satisfied with the terminology. We're going to work together to identify a potential solution. We're doing everything we can to come to some resolve. Commissioner Miller made it clear that that is going to get done. I know that the General Assembly members can probably want to chime in as well. This is a priority, and I hope that the Commonwealth of Virginia will treat this project, a $3.6 billion project, as a priority for the Commonwealth of Virginia. To move forward with signing a contract or authorizing a contract or taking action with $375 million for the Southern Trussels not identified troubles me. I'm not inclined to move forward. I know waiting will cost money, and I think the reason that it's an action item today, if we wait until March 1st, it may cost us a few million more dollars to wait. But this should be buttoned up. Something as significant as this project, $3.6 billion, and we don't have complete resolution, is troubling.
If I might, recognize that, and certainly this gives us that opportunity to be able to work forward. What I would say is the TIP amendment before you is to test fiscal constraint on the project, not necessarily to obligate us into what that contract is. Since we are looking forward to a February 8th cost proposal date, our drop dead date for a TIP amendment is in January. We wanted to get it before the TPO and the Hrtac today. I think this test gives us that fiscal constraint to the overall project. I do think that $375 million is still a troubling exercise. We recognize the fact that the Trussels need to be a part of the overall project, but the TIP amendment is just a process to initiate this, get it eligible for federal funds, and move this process along so that we have additional time to be able to accept the technical proposal, accept the cost proposals, and continue to work on identifying those funding sources.
Answer your question.
So, sir, it answers the question as relates to the TIF amendment, but still we have not identified $375 million for the Southern Trussels, whether it's because of neglect or failure to maintain, or its state of repair, or fatigue, what have you. $375 million needs to be identified so that Southern Trussels can be done. We clearly understand that our project, expanding HRBT, cannot be completed until, unless the Southern Trussels are identified as they're going to be repaired. And I think that certainly for me and the city I represent, we want to know how that's going to be paid, and hopefully it's not our Hrtac funds.
I would agree with you. I think I hear your frustration as far as $375 million is a lot of money, but compared to this project, it's not. And while this little item is holding the whole thing up, it's frustrating. But I think we need to get the TIP amendment in order to keep the project moving forward. And I'm looking to VDOT to find the funds to come up with the 375. And I'm hoping that that'll be the way it's going to end up in the long run. And because all of our money that we have, as all y'all know, what we've got in place, we've got out. Those are roads that there's no other funding. Those are other roads that we're going to build and turn over to VDOT. And I know, and it's not saying anything bad about anybody or anything, I know that if I was given a project of this size and there was a little bit left for me to put in, I'd much rather put that little bit in to get that project over the line than to, not put it in and lose the fact. Because at the end of the day, it's not only going to be a mark on us as Virginia and Hampton Roads. It's going to be a mark on VDOT for that one piece. I don't want it to be a mark on anybody. I want to have a win-win project, and I know we work together, and we're going to continue to work together, and I want us all at the end of the day to put one of the biggest projects out, and I know y'all want the same thing. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
I couldn't agree with you more. I can say for the commissioner and myself, who have been inheriting this project, as soon as we discovered that the Southern Trussels were not part of the procurement, we immediately went into action to see how we could address it. And in fact, in the going through the the design build contract moving over to the P3 procurement, trying to do everything we could to save enough money to include those trestles, which we were able to do, but we weren't doing it with state funds. So we are very aware of how important this is. We want to do it. When I was speaking with Delegate Jones one night, I made the offer, could we get the teams from House Appropriations together, Senate Finance, my team, the CFO at VDOT, open up every bucket that is there to see how we can do it. Because it's not just limited funds. We are restricted by how all of those funds can be spent. So it is much more of a process, but I do want you to know that we remain committed. If there's something that we can do with the legislature, we will do that. And we are trying to be as creative as we can in doing this. $375 million I recognize in the capacity, the magnitude of this project, but it is a tremendous amount of money for us to identify to put on this project, given the fact that we cannot authorize funds. So we're trying to find a dedicated source, if that's possible, or better yet, can we identify funding that we can put on the project? So we remain committed to do that, but I will assure you, Mayor Alexander, that once we were aware that this was not part of the entire procurement, I will tell you that my team took this very seriously, and we've been working from that moment to try to address it.
All right? Yes, sir.
I appreciate what everyone's doing on the project, and I'm confident that this will be resolved and we'll complete the project schedule. However, and maybe I'm the only one in the room, but to me, this problem points out a bigger elephant. I'm afraid that we can solve this problem, but we will face it again in the future on other issues. Also, I live in an area which has substandard roads. We're told VDOT does not have money to address those problems, and they just deteriorate year and year and year. I think the bigger problem, and it's time for, I think, our legislature to face up to the fact is VDOT is tasked with a huge responsibility that they're not funded to do. And somehow we have to find the funds, the way to increase the funds to VDOT so we don't get into this situation, and so that it can adequately perform not only the maintenance required on their existing infrastructure, but ways to construct additional assets as they're required. I remind everyone, we have Hrtac and we have the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund because VDOT was not able to meet our transportation needs, so we took it into our own hands. Now, I live in the outskirts, and my constituents don't see a big benefit, and many of them are very vocal against what we do. And people say, well, you only contribute a small amount of money. But when you look at it on a per capita basis, it's equivalent to just as much as any other location. So they have the right to complain as well, while the roads in our area are completely deteriorating. And I live on one of those roads, and with the snow recently, they got worse. And they're not going to get fixed this year. So I think the message that we need to send as a group to the legislature is funding for VDOT is inadequate, and you need to face up to the fact. When I look at my own case, in 1978, when I lived in Richmond, I drove a car that got 12 miles to the gallon. Today I drive a car that gets 28 miles to the gallon. That's more than twice as much, and I pay roughly, probably 25 to 30% of the gasoline tax. Roads, the demands are increasing, the funds are decreasing. That's catastrophe.
Thank you. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure we're going to try to tighten the meeting schedule up a little bit so we keep everybody here. So when we have a vote, we've got enough members. So just keep that in mind so I don't lose anybody, please. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, First of all, I want to thank everyone in the room, because I know that all the good intentions are here, and that everyone really wants to make this work, and I'm sure in time this will come about and it will work. I, for one, and I have to agree with Mayor Alexander on this one, I'm concerned about the citizens of Hampton Roads, because they don't have a lot of faith in being told that we're going to find a solution. And we'll go back to the Elizabeth River crossing. I mean, that has been just something that I don't think I don't think you'll ever stop hearing about Hampton Roads, and as well as you probably should not ever stop hearing about it. It was a debacle, and it's something that we're having to live with. And part of the problem that we're dealing with now is the fact that we're going to have to continue to pay for that problem for a long, long time. And it reflects in these funds in some way, I'm sure. I just want to, for one thing, mention the contingency. That's not an available amount of money, I would certainly hope. I mean, that's a contingency that's included, but certainly I don't see it as money. It's in that number, so by having it in that number, you know, I'm sure some folks could say, well, we could use that money. I would certainly not see it that way. But I am concerned very much about how the taxpayers are going to see this decision and say, we're moving forward with something that we really do not have the answer to how this is going to be paid. And that does bother me.
Thank you, Mayor Thomas. Senator Wagner, thank you for joining us. Yes, sir.
I hadn't really intended on commenting at this point, but since you called me out, I feel like I have a lot of choice. Look, I really, really want to see this project move forward in a timely manner, and I think we do. Certainly, there's a number of initiatives that we can take during the General Assembly. I'd like to move forward with it, but I can appreciate what Linda said and Kenny said. But I think we probably need to move forward today on that issue. It's important to get some clarity on it, definition of it. I hate to hesitate the word, use trust us, but show a little faith and let us do it. It's a difficult problem, as the Secretary said. It is a significant amount of money that's not been identified yet. And I understand that. I will point out that the cash flow interest of when this project is, and when we Hrtac and the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund's got to start forking over money is pretty far down the road. Months, you know, perhaps even as long as a year down the road before we start seeing significant outfall on it. Gives us a lot of time, but I'd hate to see anything step on a project if you haven't had the opportunity, you know, run through the tunnel anytime you like. And if this drags on much longer, for those that got to go back to the peninsula, you'll find out just how bad it is every day. So I think equally, while I appreciate the citizens, and this is important though, I really feel strongly that the state's obligation is on the South Trestles. It is a state function, and it is a state obligation on the South Trestles. It was never part of the original project. In my humble opinion, they're getting free trestle replacement on the north, on the back end of the Hampton Roads taxpayers, and simply because that was what it takes to build the project out. But I'll go back to a previous secretary's commitment to us, which obviously doesn't bind the current secretary, but he made it very clear that the monies we raised here would be for new construction only. And he's reiterated that fact since he's moved on to other positions, that he feels very strongly about that. So I would hope he shows a little faith. We will do everything we can to generate that kind of money. Would result to Barry's comment with regards to there's just not enough money. Nobody could agree more. I had a midlife crisis and ran for governor on that issue, and apparently the truth will set you free. You know, with that, look, I feel it. I'm an eternal optimist. I'm hopeful one day that we can at least match North Carolina in their gas tax rate, so we could start to match North Carolina on economic development, so we could start to match North Carolina on a number of different issues. And we're not going to get the economic development we anticipate without the infrastructure to support it. It's just that clear. And so I hope someday that we can convince enough legislators that this is an investment in our future, in our children's future, and we expect a return on that investment. And and we're gonna get a return on investment on Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and I hope we don't do anything to delay that, so, thanks.
Thank you. All right, the next discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to call Mr. Hall back to the podium here for a briefing on the regional network operational analysis. We'll ask him to move as quickly as possible. We've got some big decisions ahead of us.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll move through this quickly, but what I wanted to do was just give the board a quick update on where we're moving as a collaborative effort with the HRTPO, Hrtac, Federal Highway, and our staff within VDOT to look beyond where we are in 2025 at decision point on how to move in advancing the regional network. And to do that, we're looking at a regional network analysis. What we know, key facts here bearing on this potential or this problem is we do have approved projects that are underway and either in acquisition or under construction or actually exist. These are projects that are and will be affecting the Hampton Roads network in the very near future. We have an endorsement from HRTPO on what, at least in terms of geographic area and length of what the I-64 regional hot network would look like, and that's about a 39.5-mile reach of I-64, essentially stretching from the Coliseum area all the way around to Bowers Hill. That is the area that we're going to look at. The operational analysis time horizon is going to be looking at 2025 for a modeling baseline, and that is really to make sure we understand when we open up the last of these major projects, which is the tunnel expansion, where are we going to be at in terms of our network. We're going to be looking at two scenarios. The first scenario is basically what we have planned and approved. Again, that is taking into consideration our segment 1, the hot reversible portion of the network. Segment 3, which will be the tunnel constructed. Again, segment 1 moving down here to 264, and then coming around to and including what we call segment 2 alpha, or correction 2 bravo, or 2 alpha, which is our high-rise bridge project. So it will take into consideration what we sort of call the segmented option, where we just look at the projects that we have planned and approved now and how they will interrelate in the system. The dashed lines on this graphic really indicate the upstream and downstream effects that we're going to look at in the study as well. So there's obviously potential impacts of the Bowers Hill interchange. There's potential impacts upstream, the 664 interchange, and then the interchanges on upstream. We want to make sure that we encompass enough to make sure that we're taking into account what are the impacts going to be looking at the upstream and downstream effects. The second scenario that we're going to look at is more of the integrated approach, where essentially we're going to look at an integrated system, and that includes all that I mentioned before, with the difference of us adding a bidirectional segment, hot segment, which is really in the kind of bridges the gap between where the reversibles end east of 264, and then connecting in with the high-rise bridge portion and the hot network there. So that'll be essentially scenario 2. We'll be looking at that scenario as more of a holistic approach, same approach in terms of upstream and downstream areas that we'll be looking at to make sure that we're taking into consideration all the effects that would occur of putting that network in place. Some of the key objectives that we're looking at, and again, I would emphasize that we are entering into this with making sure that we have all of our key stakeholders involved, the regional planning teams, Hrtac, our federal highway partners, and really identifying the operational challenges between our segmented projects and how they're all going to fit and interact when we open this system up, as we would say, in 2020, and we have the full capacity online and interaction of all these projects. Clarifying access and entry points, so how the interchanges operate, what potential challenges are we going to have at key interchange points, and then of course transition points in and out of other egress and ingress points within the larger HOT network. These are all challenges heretofore that we really haven't dealt with, and looking at that next step of what are the advantages and disadvantages within those two scenarios, and what are some of the challenges that we can face as we move forward, given a 2025 demand model. And then, of course, we're also going to look at evaluating the hot lane and general purpose lane performance. Do we get efficiency? Do we get higher volumes? Do we get efficiency and maximize the efficiencies out of the networks that we have in place, or that we may want to plan and advance with a full regional network? So very quickly, that's really what I wanted to give you as an overview. Schedule-wise, we've already initiated our formal scoping process. Our next touch point with this body will be with the Hrtac body in April. We're going to be coming back to you with initial findings and report. We'll follow that back up again with feedback in the April-May timeframe with any adjusted additions to the report based on feedback from the board. And then we'll be prepared to present the final findings in the June timeframe, again, which lines up with what Mr. Crum briefed as sort of the decision point, or point at which the board may want to make a decision on where we're going to go with the regional system in our area here at Hampton Roads. I'll take any questions at this point.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Administrator Hall. Appreciate your presentation. Thank you for your time. All right, next we'll look to Chairman Shepherd.
Okay, at this time, the HRTPO board members, we're going to stand at ease. That is a Robert's Rules word. State, no, don't get up and walk out of here. So stand at ease, and I'll call you back to order here after the Hrtac finishes.
All right, Hrtac, we'll go ahead into number 7, actions and information. Hrtac.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agenda item 7A is an action item that stands before you. What this is entitled the I-64 HRBT New Capacity Expansion Project, authorization of chair to submit a TIP amendment request to the TPO. This is, as you've heard today, in a very stepped process in the way that the information has been provided to you. It comes from the Finance Committee with recommendation that the Commission approve the I-64 HRBT New Capacity Expansion Project Transportation Improvement Program Amendment, and also request your authorization that the chair submit the TIP amendment request to the HRTPO in this concurrent meeting. I've included in this, and I want to clarify just to make sure everyone clearly understands, that the TIP amendment request includes tolling revenues of just the water crossings only. I want to clarify that the new expansion does not include the general purpose lanes. So the tolling will always be on the new capacity, and the general purpose lanes will remain open as they are today at no charge to the general public, motoring public, or any truck or commerce or trade. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that as well. I have Councilor Englema prepared to walk us through the Hrtac Resolution 2018-02. This is a very important action of the Commission, so we felt, Mr. Chairman, coming forward to you all today with this deliberate resolution, and then have the Councilor walk through this, And if it's at the pleasure of the chair, I would like to also ask Councilman Kalima to have a roll call vote and read that roll as it's going. Yeah, you have the motion to take a roll call vote. Thank you very much. Councilman. So, yeah, point of order, we need a motion and an order for discussion. Thank you.
I'd be happy to, if you bring the resolution up on the overhead, do you have that? It's in the package as a blue sheet item, and it's Hrtac Resolution 2018-02. The recitals to the resolution reflect the fact that the Commission has previously adopted its funding plan, and that the project is now at a point where the HRTPO needs to put the project into this transportation improvement program. As we previously discussed, for it to be in the TIP, it must be fiscally constrained with a financial plan demonstrating it can be implemented. The resolution makes specific note of the fact that the Hrtac funding plan, the $3.562 billion, does not include funding for the South Trestles. It also reflects the fact that the toll revenues that are part of the funding plan are just sourced from the two water crossings, and it indicates that when the letter is delivered to the TPO, it should specifically confirm both of those facts. The letter that will be delivered is attached as an exhibit to the resolution. In that letter, as you will see, it indicates under the project description that it does not include funding for the South Trestles. It also reflects the fact that the $3.562 billion is a not to exceed amount. Further states that if there is smart scale funding applied to the project, it would float down the Hrtac commitment. And then it finally states that the anticipated toll revenues would be generated solely from tolling at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and High Rise Bridge water crossings, with Hrtac receiving all those toll revenues.
Okay, got it.
Yes, sir.
All right, any discussion on it before we get into motion?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I want to make a couple of comments. I do understand that the tolling in this proposal only can be on the water crossings at HRBT and the High Rise Bridge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
However, there's nothing to preclude VDOT from placing tolls on other facilities that they deem necessary in the network. Is that not true?
If they're non-Hrtac financed facilities, that is true.
That is true. But in the network, as they define the network, they can place tolls on other facilities within the network.
Yes, sir.
Okay? If we approve this today, this not only approves the TIF amendment going forward, but it also approves the plan and the funding of the plan, and that we may not have another opportunity to vote Hrtac if we send this over to TPO. Is that correct?
Before the project can move forward in March, Hrtac would have to approve the execution and delivery of a funding agreement with VDOT. VDOT would not be able to enter into their construction contract with the contractor unless they had a funding agreement in place with Hrtac.
So the last and final question, this is truly, as VDOT has described it, just a test of the TIF amendment to see what else is out there as it relates to permit financing on their part.
Hrtac is validating to the TPO that the plan, the TIP can be fiscally constrained because there is funding available for the new capacity construction.
Last and final question. So if I vote no today, I'll have an opportunity to vote at another time on the overall plan.
You will be entitled to vote on the funding agreement before it is executed and delivered to VDOT.
Thank you, sir. I tend to vote no today.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, do I have a motion? Just state your name.
Donnie Tuck, and so moved.
All right, do I have a second? Second. All right, we're going to go to a roll call.
Who was the second, please?
I will.
Oh. That's agreed. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Rabel?
Yes.
Mayor Tuck?
Yes.
Mr. Ackery?
Yes.
Chair Hippel?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Mayor Alexander?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Freiling? Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Delegate Jones? Delegate Stolley?
Yes.
Delegate Yancey?
Yes.
Senator Wagner?
Yes.
The action carries.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving forward, agenda item 7B is an action item before you that comes forward from the Finance Committee with recommendation for approval to adopt the modified Hrtac Statement of Investment Policy. Just a quick background for you all. We hired PFM to assist us at the Commission to move forward with our investment strategies and also provide to us any tweaks as moving forward with our investment policy. At the Finance Committee's meeting this past Monday, December 13th, the committee was briefed on proposed modifications brought forward and provided feedback. It was very valuable feedback, and I want to thank you, Mr. Porter, for your input. And also, after finding out what you used to do for a living, sir, your career was very successful in the area of finance. I really appreciate moving forward with the recommendations today that have been inserted into our statement of investment policy. We have Nelson Bush here from PFM, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, to speak to this. But other recommendations as well, just to keep the Commission in information of where we are. We are adding a custody account structure change so that we can continue to move forward with the laddered investment strategy we have. One has a cash portfolio, and the other one has one that deals with securities and other types of investments. So we're trying to separate that portfolio for better accounting purposes. We also have an investment reallocation, which is to reallocate $200 to $250 million from our LGI Local Government Investment Pool Program into the Enhanced Cash Portfolio. The investment policy modifications brought forward today from the Finance Committee include modifications that only still continue to be compliant with law, which we are required to do, but also to be compliant with the recommendations that came out of the Finance Committee that were very valuable to us in the development of these modifications. So, Mr. Chairman, I turn this back over to you, and also Finance Committee Chair Wagner, in case you may have any questions before Mr. Chairman, you can call for a vote. Chair Wagner.
No, I mean, I think Kevin explained it very well. These are minor modifications. It actually opens up a couple of options, not risk options, just quite frankly, it's the way Moody's and certain bond rating agencies have just unilaterally kind of required. We required a AA. They took companies that are previously we had invested in AA quality and just said they were A companies, and just across the board, not based on the quality of the company at all. So this keeps our options open. Quite frankly, what allows us for is a very, very safe investment at a slightly better rate of return, which is what it's all about. So
Thank you.
I hope you approve it.
Any discussions? Motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No? Any abstentions? All right, well, that takes care of everything as far as what we need.
We have one minor presentation for you, sir, but we could defer if we have to. There's a component unit series of questions that were asked in the last commission meeting. We're prepared to speak to that today, but if you're at the risk of losing a quorum and want to move forward with the TPOJ, we can sort of come back to the next meeting.
Can we do that?
Sure. Is that okay with you?
Bring that to the next meeting? Okay, because we've got a lot we're trying to take care of.
All right, very good.
Thank you. Apologize for that.
So the rest of your package is offered as informational items, sir. The floor is yours to announce the next meeting, and I'll move on.
The next Hrtac regular meeting is March 21st, 2019 at 12:30 in this building. And if there's something we need to call special during that time, prior to that, we will, as we work through issues with VDOT and move forward. We want to wish everybody happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. thank you for all your service to your community and to the citizens and all the great work you've done this year. It is very much appreciated, not only by me, but I'm sure all your other board members. Thank you very much, and mission adjourned.
Okay, good, no one's rushing for the door, okay. All right, now, what we're about to do, the TPO, I'm calling it back to order. All the great stuff that just happened, nothing's going anywhere unless we approve it through TPO, okay? So Mike Kimball going to brief on two action items. Actually, I don't think the first one really needs a briefing. The first one is the FY 2018-2021 TIP amendment for the Laskin Road project in Virginia Beach. Unless somebody needs a detailed briefing on that, I'll just call for a motion.
I will move for approval.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that first one's done, great. Now the second one is the TIP amendment for the I-64 Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion. All right, and Mike Kimball will brief that. Mike?
Okay, thank you. By this time, I'm sure everyone's an expert on this, but we'll walk you one more time through this TIP amendment just to make sure everyone has the information clear. So as you just heard, the Hrtac took action to request an amendment of our HRTPO fiscal year 2018 to 21 Transportation Improvement Program to add the I-64 Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel Expansion New Capacity Project. The current UPC is a temporary UPC, T21555, that will receive a permanent UPC later. We'll not include that T after that. In terms of project description, it's widening I-64 to 6 lanes from Settlers Landing Road to I-564, expanding the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel to provide 8 lanes across the Hampton Roads Harbor. And as has been pointed out, this project excludes replacement of existing bridges, which have been referred to as the south trestles between Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel South Island and the Norfolk Shore. We'll walk you through that one more time. To orient to the map, Hampton is to the north, and Norfolk is on the other end. We've got the existing tunnels of the North Island and the South Island. The north trestles would be the trestles between Hampton and the North Island, and the south trestles would be between the South Island and the Norfolk Shore. A closer view shows the existing trestles on the north side, and those trestles will be included as part of the new expansion completion. So all of the north trestles will be part of the project that we're doing a TIP amendment to approve today. This is looking at the part from the South Island over to the Norfolk Shore. The new capacity improvement project includes a new bridge tunnel facility. The existing trestles we're referring to as the south trestles are excluded from the project we're getting ready to approve today. In terms of project schedule, we have PE right-of-way and construction schedules here. As you can see, the construction is currently expected to be completed in November of 2026. The cost estimates are listed here for each of those phases, totaling to the $3.562 billion number before earlier. And the asterisk points to the note that says this is a not-to-exceed amount, and that the actual project cost should be equal to or less than the amounts shown. In terms of allocations, we have the allocations shown per fiscal year that total up to $3.562 billion. It's all Hampton Roads Transportation Fund, the regional money, except for FY 2024, also includes $345 million of expected Hrtac total revenues from those hot lanes. Additional conditions of approval, you heard these also mentioned today. HRTPO has submitted a smart scale application for $200 million for the HRBT project. The funding agreement between Hrtac and VDOT will state that any funding resulting from the smart scale will supplant HRTF allocations on the project. So should we be successful in getting $200 million from smart scale, that will release $200 million from regional funds that can be used to fund another regional priority project. In addition, Hrtac, the funding plan assumes that Hrtac will control the tolling of facilities and finances and receive all toll finances from these, or all toll revenues from these projects. And the current plan is to toll only the hot lanes at the HRBT and high-rise bridge projects at this time. So for the recommended approval, it's to approve the TIP amendment with the noted conditions, subject to receipt of no adverse comments during the public comment period. Our public involvement process requires a 2-week public comment period for all TIP amendments, and that comment period will start today and run through December 27th. And that's it for my comment.
Okay. Any questions?
Move for approval with stated conditions.
Okay, and I'll call for a motion here. All right. Are there any questions, speaker, at this time? Okay, before we call for a motion, I couldn't help but kind of think about the history, just overwhelmed by the history of this and the achievement. And Mike, I appreciate your leadership and the Hrtac gets this done. You know, if you think about the 61 years ago, we built the tunnel. And if you think about, I don't know, they didn't have a TPO then. They didn't have an FPO. I don't know what they had. But somehow they got it done. And it is what it is today. And so here, through all the analysis that we've gone through all the great work, 17 municipalities, think of it, 17 municipalities coming together to agree to do this thing. I remember the mayor of Williamsburg saying he didn't think he'd ever seen anything like this in his lifetime. And it's just amazing. So what we're going to do today, when we get this in, yes, we're going to be able to modify it as necessary later on through various actions through the Hrtac. But this is something that's going to affect this region probably for the next 100 years and the generations that follow. It's pretty amazing. Okay, accept the motion.
Move for approval with conditions stated.
And you a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm going to have a roll call, please. Shelley? I'm sorry.
Readiness, again, will this come back to TPO for further action?
Well, my understanding, and this is the way I understand it, probably the way most everybody will understand it, hopefully, is that we are putting this project in our plan, okay, any specific plan. And this is allowing, through federal law, it's tied to this, even though the federal government is not putting money into it, is allowing us now to proceed under that federal guidelines and requirements, and we're going to fund it. So to answer your question, is that it is an amendment to our plan. So if we ever want to amend the plan, we can. But if you modify the Hrtac plan, does not necessarily mean that it modifies the TPO plan. Correct there, am I saying correct? That's good.
Further question, I understand that the plan, we're putting the plan, but also we're putting a funding plan as well in this amendment. Is that not true?
The fact is, to put it in our plan, it has to be fiscally constrained. The presentation that's given to us by Hrtac that has been approved by Hrtac states that is a fiscally constrained plan. Now, what we're going to do is agree that it's a fiscally constrained plan and put it in the plan. So nothing can go into the Hampton Roads Transportation Plan unless it's approved by the TPO. The state's requirements under Hrtac basically are saying yes, based upon what we saw, the $3.5-something billion and the tolling and all that bits and pieces, make it fiscally, one, possible, and two, constrained. So that'll meet our requirements.
I'll ask one final question. Are the southern trestles, are they in this plan as well?
No.
They're not in this plan. Thank you.
Okay, Kelly, we start with the roll call, unless there's any other questions. None, Kelly?
Mayor West?
Yes.
Mr. Cheatham?
Yes.
Mayor Tuck?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Hrtpo?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Mayor Alexander?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mayor Rowe?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Senator Wagner?
Yes.
Delegate Starling?
Yes.
Delegate Yancey?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Trogdon?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Vick?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes, and congratulations. Okay,
Mr. Shepherd, if I may, this will only take 30 seconds. make certain that we're tight on this. There are actually 2 tip amendments. One was distributed as a supplement. Mike, can you describe that in 20 seconds?
Yes, sir. There's actually 2 separate UPCs for the Alaska Road project, but they were joined together as far as project goes in terms of going to add. And at the CTB meeting in October on the 30th, the CTB approved additional funding from the Smart Scale program for that project because we needed a little additional funding. In addition, the city of Virginia Beach is providing over $9 million, almost a match for what VDOT's providing for that project. And they'd like to go to add to that project in January, so it'd be helpful for them to get the approval for the tip amendment. So that would be for both UPC 12546 and also UPC 11711.
Mr. Chairman, if we could just ask for concurrence from the board that the approval addresses both of those, then certainly have our eyes dotted and T's crossed.
I made the motion, I certainly agree with both, yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Great, okay. No more surprises. Okay, with that then, I will adjourn this meeting and that ends it for today.
Mr.
Thank
Shepherd,
you.
I did have just one comment.
We're
30
not
seconds.
adjourned, hang on, okay, go ahead.
Well, and Mayor Johnson touched on it, and the gentleman in other comments also touched on it. Within the last several weeks, there was an op-ed in our daily press about the impact of the tolls at the Elizabeth River crossing, particularly of the burden that it places on the residents of Portsmouth. And I do know from being in meetings with Mayor Rowe that his feelings about tolls is such that he said he will not support any tolling on the different projects we have. And we were taken to task in this particular op-ed, and I don't know all the history and background of that project, but it said as a region we have not necessarily stepped forward to support the folks in Portsmouth in trying to get something done about these tolls. And so I just want to put that out there. I'm not sure what we can do, but I want to at least let Mayor Rowe know that he's not alone in his feelings about the burden being unfairly placed on the residents of Portsmouth.
John?
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mayor Tom. Can we put this on the next agenda
Yes, we can.
with the goal to have unity and support of this?
Okay, yes, so, Bob, put that on the next agenda. When's our next meeting?
Our next meeting will be the 3rd Thursday of January.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Going once, going twice?